Hi, everyone. We'll get started in just a couple minutes, but go ahead and take this time to introduce yourselves in the chat. It feels a little strange to be sitting here staring at each other in the Zoom room. So let's go ahead and just jump right into it. Welcome. Hello. My name is Kate Rubin. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the organizing director at Seattle. Tonight's Building Tenant Power workshop is Persuasive Communication and Tenant Organizing. We are joined tonight by our guest presenter, Sonatina Sanchez, and our special guest speaker, Devin Silvernail. I'm going to start us off with a land acknowledgement. We are on the land of the Coast Salish peoples. I would like to recognize that we are occupying the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. As we do this important work on these lands, we understand that our collective liberation cannot happen without Indigenous sovereignty. We encourage each of you to sign a petition for federal recognition of the Duwamish tribe, and if you're able, visit the Longhouse and pay rent to the Duwamish. You can learn more from Real Rent Duwamish. We'll include a link for them in the resource guide that we'll drop in the chat and send after the presentation. Our resource guide also contains contact information for the Renting in Seattle helpline, the Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections, also known as SDCI. They're responsible for enforcing landlord-tenant laws. It includes information for the Seattle Office for Civil Rights, as well as a bunch of other organizations that provide services for renters. Please remain muted while the guest speakers are presenting. And remember that this workshop is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube later. So if you are concerned about privacy, you're welcome to turn off your camera or change your name displayed on the screen. We encourage each of you to get more involved with Seattle. We're seeking table volunteers, folks to flyer, and people interested in developing their skills as part of a tenant leadership team. We host 2 renter councils every month, the Elder Renter Council, which centers renters age 55 plus, and the Seattle Renter Organizing Council, also known as SROC. These councils were created for renters to work together to strategize and fight for renter protections that they feel are important to their communities, give and receive peer-to-peer support for folks organizing in their building, grow renter power, and build community. And we'll drop links to sign up for our email lists in the chat. We also recently started a Discord server for the council members to chat between our monthly meetings, and we'll drop a link to the chat as well. This link only lasts for 7 days, so if you are watching this on YouTube and you'd like to join our Discord, send me an email, Kate, Kate, @bseattle.org, and I will send you an updated link. So before we get into the bulk of our workshop, we've got a bunch of events that we'd like to share with you. Thursday, July 27th at 4 p.m. It'll be Fascism 101 training series, Fascism, White Nationalism, and Xenophobia. Join Highlander Research and Education Center and Write to the City for session 3 of the Fascism 101 series. It's an 8-part series. Session 3 will feature Ashley Henderson, Steve Gardner, and Gracia Martinez Rosas as and moderator Malika Devich-Cyril to discuss the role of white nationalism and xenophobia in fascist ideology historically and in the US today. They will also examine how white nationalism and xenophobia are leveraged in contemporary culture wars and policy fights to mobilize the base. This is a great workshop for you if you want to understand the threat of globally resurgent fascism. The series is in English with Spanish and American Sign Language interpretation available. Thursday, July 27th at noon, the People's Hub presents Liberation Through Connection, Building Power Across Solidarity, Economy, and Disability Justice. The People's Hub connects movements and people to build power and foster solidarity. This summer, they're focusing on disability justice and the solidarity economy, inviting the community to join a discussion with co-directors Hafida Akwai and Dustin Gibson, along with special guest Miriam Kaba, to share their vision and learn from the community. They ask that you bring something meaningful that represents disability justice and solidarity economy work. Saturday, July 29th and Sunday, July 30th at 20th and Union. It's Books, Bites, and Beats, an event by Made Space Seattle and Loving Room Books for Books. This is a multidisciplinary art and culture festival centered around Black and diaspora, food, music, writing, and film, spanning the northeast corner of 20th and Union into and through both spaces of Loving Room Books and Made Space Seattle. Interactive and intergenerational arts offerings that feature written and spoken word, visual arts, music, dance, film, and more. It's sponsored by Africatown Seattle and the Seattle Office of Arts. Tuesday, August 20th, 2 p.m. at Seattle City Hall. It's the next full city council meeting. So last week at the Renters' Rights Committee meeting, Councilmember Sawant introduced legislation for rent control in Seattle. Rent control is still illegal in Washington state, but if the law gets overturned at a state level, this bill would trigger really strong rent control legislation in Seattle without loopholes. The vote didn't make it out of committee. Councilmember Morales was the only other yes vote, and council members Lewis, Nelson, and Juarez voted no. So the full city council will vote on this legislation at this upcoming meeting. We need a strong renter movement to pressure them to change their vote to yes. Councilmember Sawant has created a form where you can sign up to receive specific instructions about how to register for public comment, and they'll also send along suggested talking points, but you can always use your own. Your voice and your story is powerful, so please show up and tell your council why you need rent control. Also, Tuesday, August 1st, 8 p.m., the ballots for the August primary election are due. So if you want to ensure that your electeds will protect renters going forward, you need to do your part to ensure that the people you want representing you make it through the primaries. There's also an important vote on Proposition 1 to renew the Veterans, Seniors, and Human Services Levy. This levy is a critical investment in our community. So vote yes to provide funding to keep people from losing their homes, get families who recently became homeless back into stable housing, educate renters about their rights, and provide legal help for people who've had their state benefits denied or cut, and more. Wednesday, August 2nd at noon at Seattle City Hall, it's the Services Not Sweeps rally. Join the Services Not Sweeps Coalition for our very first rally. East Seattle is part of this coalition. We'll have speakers from the coalition and folks with lived experience talk about the harm caused by sweeps and how that harm increases during times of extreme weather. And then join us after to attend the public Assets and Homelessness Committee meeting at 2 p.m. for public comment to tell City Council that you support our campaign to end encampment removals during the winter and extreme weather events. Monday, August 7th, 10 a.m. It's a presentation and conversation on the cornerstones of co-governance for a just and equitable future, presented by the Just Futures Project Partners. The Just Futures Project Partners are excited to share a framework on aligning government and community efforts towards justice, co-governance, and well-being in Washington State. They look forward to sharing space and gathering your feedback. Wednesday, August 9th, 3 to 4:45 p.m. It's Solid Ground's Rent Smart webinar, just general tenant information. Discuss tenants' rights and procedures from Washington State's Residential Landlord Tenant Act. You'll learn how to make a formal repair request, break your lease, formally move out of your unit, get your deposit back, and more. Wednesday, August 9th through Sunday, August 13th at the People of Color Against AIDS Network, Spokane office. It's Pacific Northwest Black Pride. Celebrate the 6th year of the PNBP weekend celebration with 4 eventful days of fostering inclusion and advancing equity within the Black LGBTQIA+ community of the greater Pacific Northwest area. Thursday, August 10th, 6:30 p.m. at El Centro de la Raza in the Roberto Maestros Digital Literacy Lab or online via Zoom. It's the next SROC meeting. We have been working on creating a sign-on letter to call on Seattle City Council to create an Office of Renters' Rights Standards to protect renters, similar to how the Office of Labor Standards protects workers. This letter is going to go out this week, so we'll be talking about the letter and who signed on and next steps. We'll also have space for peer-to-peer building organizing support, and we'll have dinner provided. And then Wednesday, August 16th, 12:30 to 2:30 p.m. at Columbia Library or online via Zoom is the next Elder Renter Council meeting. I want to note that we normally meet at the Capitol Hill Library, but for the second month in a row, there was a scheduling conflict. So we were only able to get space at Columbia Library. But this library is also fully accessible, and snacks and beverages will be provided for all in-person attendees. And Wednesday, August 22nd from 5:30 to 7 p.m. It's the RAP King County Regional Call. So the aim of the Resident Action Project, also known as RAP, is to build a statewide network of people who are directly impacted by housing and homelessness issues who are leading the charge for social change. So gain organizing, advocacy, and policy skills by attending RAP's monthly regional Zoom meetings. They're held on the 4th Tuesday of every month at 5:30 p.m. Wednesday, August 23rd, 3 to 4:45 p.m. It's Solid Ground's Rent Smart webinar, What to Look For as a Senior Renter. If you're a senior looking to know your rights about a renter, learn everything you need to know about what to look for in your housing search, which resources are best suited for your search, using your credit history to find the best housing opportunity, navigating through discrimination as a senior, and factoring safety and community in your housing. Also on Wednesday, August 23rd at 6 p.m. is Seattle's next Building Tenant Power workshop, Sweeps, Evictions by Another Name. Join Seattle and community organizers for a workshop focused on understanding how sweeps are actually evictions, and understanding the new ruling surrounding the legality of sweeps. You'll also learn about the importance of the winter sweeps and extreme weather ban that the Services Not Sweeps Coalition is fighting for and how you can get involved. And then finally, Saturday, August 26th, from noon to 4 p.m. at Rainier Beach Community Center Plaza. It's the 2023 Back to School Bash. Join the Rainier Beach Action Coalition for the 20th year of the Back to School Bash with free backpacks, school supplies, food, community resources, entertainment, vaccinations, and the barbershop chat. Okay, Thank you for bearing with me. We got lots of fun stuff happening in the next month or so. So now I'd like to talk about our guest host and our special guest. First, I'd like to introduce Sanatina Sanchez, the resident representative on the board of directors at one of Seattle's affordable housing nonprofits, Community Root Housing. CRH manages over 40 properties across the city, most of which are in Capitol Hill. Sanatina is the founder of Crafting Sound Meaning and works as a communications specialist, using her professional training and lived experiences to bring intersectional perspectives to projects to reach those like her who hold multiple marginalized identities. As an autistic child of autistic parents, being able to interpret mainstream society and how to thrive in it has been a lifelong journey. Sanatina has been a resident of Community Roots Housing for over a decade and currently sits on the board of League of Women Voters in Seattle King County as a membership chair. Is active in the Transit Writers Union, Puget Sound Tenants Union.
I'm not sure I understand.
Oh, my phone just commented on that. The Seattle Renter Organizing Council and mutual aid groups serving those in her neighborhood who've been marginalized from society. And our special guest for the evening is Devin Silvernail. Devin is actually the founder of Seattle and currently works as the policy director for Councilmember Tammy Morales in District 2. Devin has a lot of experience as an advocate for tenants' rights and the rights of our unhoused neighbors. He was co-chair of the Seattle Renters Commission. And prior to that, he worked as a community, tenant, and political organizer, and as a constituent services aide for a city/county supervisor in San Francisco. Through this previous work, Devin gained a deep appreciation for constituent issues. He firmly believes that action at City Hall starts with activism in the community. Thank you both so much for being here, Sanatina and Devin. I'm going to hand the mic over to Sanatina and we'll get started.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you all for coming. If you are able to and would like to be a part of the conversation, feel free to come off or come onto camera or come off mute. This is, I've designed this to be a conversation about how we communicate and what your goals may be in your particular advocacy. Because one of the things about the communication in general, right, is that it really does come down to one-to-one messages. So when we are crafting any kind of messages, any kind of letters or speeches, we are trying to think of the specific person that we are trying to reach. And there might be a group of people we're trying to reach. It's still usually one person or one kind of person that is that we're trying to focus on. And so that is going to be what today's presentation is about. So my PowerPoint seems to be not wanting to be working with me. So what I'm going to do is I'm opening a whiteboard and I am going to, I don't know. Okay. What I'm going to do is post in this whiteboard. Go. Where's the text? There we go. Let's see if I can make it bigger. Haha. Well, that's not as big. That's weird. There we go. Okay, so readable, not readable, let me know. But this is the sort of agenda of the meeting. So communication strategies for renter rights advocates. You're the renter right advocates. what are the different areas that are involved in communications related to renters' rights? Well, we need to understand your audience, right? So the first thing to do is know who you're talking to. Next, we tailor your message, what I just said about who you want to speak to. And then we want to look at the types of channels. So is it going to be an email? Is it going to be a speech? Is it going to be a phone call or a presentation or meeting like this? Then there's also partnerships and alliances. So as Kate mentioned in my introduction, I'm a member of many different groups, and each of those groups has different mores, different cultures, different ways of interacting with each other. So that's something to think about when you are trying to build connections with each other. Then we get into the kind of nitty gritty. Oh, actually, I forgot. Engaging with policymakers and media and public relations should be up there with building partnerships and alliances. That's why Devin's here. And then, but yeah, the meat and potatoes of messaging, right? Overcoming challenges in communication, active listening and empathy. Those two things are about how we think about communication in ourselves and what we are trying to present ourselves in. So, and then finally, the conclusion, the power of grassroots advocacy. It all comes together in how you take this advice and use it and bring power to your life and your advocacy. So let's chat about understanding your audience. So I don't want to, can I, apparently I can't, I don't want to close the whiteboard. I just want to make it not full screen. There we go. Okay. So let's talk about understanding your audience. So what are the different audiences that we can think about? If we want to, we can start brainstorming, or I can paste lists. But what is an audience that you are thinking about working with right now? And I can post it in the I can type it in. Is anybody trying to connect with a particular audience right now in your advocacy? Is nobody here?
Quiet, and we're trying to get this through. Yes, the Seattle Renter Organizing Council is trying to pressure City Council into creating a whole new office.
City Council. So that is legislate. What did I title it? Local policymakers and government officials, right? So, oops.
And Sanatina, can you maybe zoom out just a little bit? Because I think it's off screen for us.
Oh, sorry. Say this is.
Oh wait, no, it's maybe it's just me.
If you can't see anything, let me know. So, because I see Kate, you have a icon roaming around the whiteboard.
I'm in here now. And there's a comment here in the chat. Fabian says, for me, I'm trying to connect with residents, tenants, and people who have experienced housing hardship.
Wonderful. So for that one, we have tenant and renter communities.
So I saw someone else commented that it was mostly off screen for them. And what I realized I had to do is adjust my own. And the way to do that is down where you see the zoom, set it to fit to screen.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was missing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank Kate. It's been a while since I've used the whiteboard and not necessarily in such an open environment. So thank you. But this is good. It's interactive. It you know, it's a little bit more interactive than a general presentation. So we have local policymakers and government officials, tenants and renter communities. Are there any other audiences you can think of in terms of working on renter advocacy?
I've been dealing with some unfortunate property managers and building owners.
Ah, yes, I'm surprised that one didn't come up, the first one. Landlords and property managers. Yeah, and I'm just going to put these last two. We have oh, we got it. The last one, actually, the fourth one is media and press. And a lot of people do forget about this one because they think of it after they don't think of it as necessarily as a relationship building necessarily, but more of a resource. And so that's one of the things that I really want to get into about how you develop relationships with people who write the news, and that can be really helpful to your cause. So the first one, though, that we are going to talk about are local policymakers and government officials. And one of the reasons we're doing that is because we have a member of that here with us today, Devin Silvernail. And I would like you, Devin, if you wouldn't mind, to take a moment to introduce yourself and what is your role around communications in the office that you are working in?
Hey everybody, yeah, my name is Devin Silvernail, as has been said a lot. Policy Director for Councilmember Morales in District 2 of Seattle. So that's the CID, Yeslo Terrace area, all the way down the Rainier Valley, city limits, also including Beacon Hill, where we have one of our constituents, Kate. And I actually have I don't handle communications in the office. I do the policy development in the office, but the way that we do policy development is through co-creation. Everything we do is co-created with community members and affected communities. And so I would say we do have a really brilliant communications person, Evelyn Chow. I have to shout them out. But everything we do is in communication and in partnership with community. So, we've built that into the core of what we do. So luckily, I talked to Kate just this morning, for example. We have constant communication with folks out there.
Great. So, Devin, can you take me through some of the strategies, some of the most effective strategies you found that community members, just a random community member who's not even connected to any kind of organization, what are some of the ways that are effective to communicate with your department or your office?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And Sonatina, I do want to start just by kind of listing a couple of the things that we've done with partnership with community, because I really want to use that as a way to illustrate kind of our brand of organizing, which is coalition building and really through positive energy. And so as was mentioned, I was co-chair of the Seattle Renters Commission. I was a member of the Renters Commission for 2 years before coming into this office. While on the Renters Commission, we pushed 2 policies that did not exist in the United States before that. 180-day notice for rent increases, which we stole from Montreal, and a winter eviction ban, which we stole from France. And those are two things that are now city law.
Vive
We
la
are the
France.
first city in the country to do that. And vive la France, yeah. Vive Quebec as well. You know, and we're the first city in the country to do that. And now cities across Washington State are adopting those two pieces of I would say very basic, very essential tenant protections. You know, since taking office, we passed the single largest expansion of the just cause eviction ordinance in the city's history, alongside people like Kate and Dee and other folks at B Seattle. And you know, we gave people the ability to hide their eviction screening or their eviction from landlords and screening companies if they were evicted during the COVID emergency. We won defense to eviction for people who suffered hardship during the COVID emergency. So basically everybody. You know, we did a lot of work for tenants. And, you know, I bring those tenant victories up specifically because they were won through coalition building, and they were won through, like I said, a positive form of organizing. And for me, you know, and this was something that was very important for me at B Seattle when I was the director, quote unquote. Kate does a much better job. Kate and Tanya do a much better job than I could ever do. But you know, it was very important for me to lead with two mantras, and one is power concedes nothing without a demand. Never did and never will. Right? You know, Frederick Douglass said that. You know, and then Harvey Milk said, you know, that, oh man, I don't remember the mantra anymore because I said it all the time. I said it all the time.
Do you remember, Kate?
Do you remember? No, it was something about hope. You know, you can't live on hope alone. But you know, without hope, the us's of the world give up. And you know, so that's the organizing strategy that we do, and that's what I would recommend to everybody, is to lead with hope. And you know, I think about Harvey Milk specifically because I learned how to organize in San Francisco, and that was how we organized, with hope, with reminding people that, you know, you and you and you and everyone here in this room and everyone watching on YouTube, you know, all of us, the us's of the world, deserve, you know, deserve the basic human right of housing, deserve to be heard when they're talking to their elected officials, and they deserve the right to organize. And you know, so I think that is a very basic thing, that if you come, especially to elected officials, with that message of hope, it actually does resonate quite a lot. Because I'm not the only crazy lefty socialist that works for, you know, a corporate Democrat at city council, and I would say Tammy is not that at all. But you know, yeah, there's a lot of us. There's a lot of us in there in the staff, and that message of hope and being willing to work in coalition, it goes a long way. And you know, I think that has helped serve Kate and a lot of the folks that we've worked with, because they will hold us accountable, but you know, will always also walk with us arm in arm with that message of hope. And it's been very, very powerful.
So I appreciate that, and from a larger advocacy perspective, yeah, absolutely. I do wonder though, so if I'm just like a tenant, right, and I'm like, my landlord is giving me troubles and I don't want to do any research, I don't have the capacities for time, I email my council member, who maybe happens to be Tammy Morales, and I'm like, hey, you're supposed to be help, you're right, you're my help, right? How can I get help? So that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about in terms of like, when a person is first coming into communicating with your office and doesn't really have a lot of experience in getting involved with politics, what do you feel is sort of the best way for them to present their issues and get, you know, yeah, how can they present themselves in the best way?
Yeah, thanks for
Oh,
putting a
Fabian
finer
asked if you could repeat that. So if I'm just a tenant and I'm asking for help, how can I best communicate with this office and find resources and you know, if I want to, like, you know, go after my landlord, what is it that I do?
point. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I will say, I will be honest, you know, a council office, we have 3 jobs. You know, we have 3 roles, what we do. One, we pass and amend legislation and laws. We advocate on behalf of our community and to city departments. And we pass a budget. Like, those are the 3 things, those are 3 powers. And honestly, if you look at the executive department, for example, they have a lot more power than us. But that being said, you know, if you are having an issue with your landlord and you live in our district, reach out to me, reach out to Evelyn, you know, because we're not necessarily going to be able to fix the problem for you. But, you know, before working in Tammy's office, I was a tenant organizer. I used to work with tenants to go after SHA and to go after Cadence Real Estate and these, you know, these folks that feel impenetrable. So you can reach out to us and you know, we can connect you with the folks in the city that can provide you with help, you know, more direct help, like the Department of Construction and Inspections, which enforces our laws in the city, and the Office for Civil Rights that also enforces our laws around the fair housing ordinance. So yeah, when talking to our office, for sure, I mean, we're an open door. You can call, you know, email me is better, honestly. Email me or Evelyn, and you know, we'll do our best to get you in touch with the people that you need to talk to. If it's about legislation, if it's about getting something done, I'm the person to talk to as well. Because again, like the council member, if you were to email the council member, for example, she gets over 1,000 emails a day. It's very hard for us to actually find that. But if you go directly to the staff, and that's any council member, go directly to the staff. That's your way on the door for sure.
Email staff, not members directly.
Yeah, and each council member is different, I will say. I'm lucky. I'm
That
very,
was like,
yeah.
that was actually going to be what I was going to ask, because yeah,
Okay.
you're very open. And so do you think that different council members or offices require different strategies in order to be more effective as just a regular citizen or resident?
I think for everybody, the base is to talk to staff first. But each council member is going to treat what their staff brings to them differently. And I'm not going to single out any council member, because that also doesn't help you in that organizing around hope. But I will say that Tammy, you know, we are her advisors. We are her policy co-creators. She trusts us. Not every staff person is that lucky. But they are going to be the folks who are going to be going and talking to departments on behalf of their boss. And so some folks do take it upon themselves to do that constituent work and to interface with the departments. I mean, not even running it by their boss, right? So that is absolutely the first place to go. But if you are going for something bigger, like let's say rent control, which Kate brought up, that's going to take a different approach with every office. You know, our office, you know, whatever, you know, Tammy supported rent control forever. I contributed information to the draft ordinance that Councilmember Sawan's office wrote. So for us, you know, those 2 offices off the books. But you know, but I think every other office out there, you would want to, at that point, because it does involve legislation, find a way to talk to the council member themselves. Some offices offer office hours, you know, where they can meet in community, or, you know, like Councilmember Strauss, for example, has office hours at the Ballard Community Center or something like that. Some fancy building that Ballard gets that we don't. I know Councilmember Juarez does district office hours. We do district office hours. So there's a lot that do that. Councilmember Lewis does farmers markets. So that would be a place to get a one-on-one face-to-face conversation with your council member as well. But I bet you can always get a staff conversation. And, you know, there are several offices, I'd say at least 3 or 4 offices where the staff are the folks who really, you know, we're kind of the engine of City Hall too. So it's definitely good to get in there.
So I'm glad you brought up that because so here's the thing, like I would like to talk about one of the challenges I have with communication in my life is following up and maintaining ongoing communication. And so can you talk a little bit about the that level of, you know, checking in, or how do you feel that it's best to develop those relationships in an ongoing manner? Because yeah, I always feel like I don't want to bother people, but I don't know, you know, how often I should maybe reach out and see if something like, yeah, that's the kind of thing of like, how do you develop that kind of relationship with your office, with any kind of government office or official?
Well, I'll put it this way, that before I worked in City Hall, it took a long ass time for B Seattle to be taken seriously at City Hall. And, you know, it took us like 4 or 5 years, 4 years to get any kind of funding from the city. That opened the door a little bit. And then we got more and more, and Kate and Tanya just keep getting more and more to do the great work that they do. That was the same with council offices. And it's kind of shitty, but I would say, you know, it's that idea of fake it till you make it. You know, that you know, I had an organization, right, which was you know, the tenants that I worked with, right, like you know, in buildings across the city, or unhoused people that I met with and offered, you know, mutual aid to. That was the organization, right? And so I think giving yourself, talking about yourself with like a little bit of credence, you know, like saying like, hey, well, I'm part of this organization, I'm part of this coalition, that goes a long way. You know, and then even beyond like the fake it till you make it thing, I think it's okay to be annoying. I used to say, when I was doing tenant rights workshops for B Seattle, that a good organizer feels like they're being annoying, right? Like that's your job.
That's a good thing to hear. Yeah, no, that's a good thing to hear, because I think a lot of us are used to really not thinking that's okay, but you're right. It is our job to be the squeaky wheel. 2 things. I see your hand, Kate. Carrie had a good note about my question as well. How to come across as genuine versus transactional, which is a very good nuanced discussion in a lot of different cases. And I want to get to that. Kate, what is your question?
It was actually just a little bit of an expansion on Devin's statement about credibility. And because I started with B Seattle without having many community connections in January of 2020, so it was hard to build relationships. When I found people who were interested in similar things and had similar values, I asked them to A, invite me to their meetings, and B, to accompany me to other meetings. And that was how I've started building trust, because you'll see the same people over and over giving public comment, and if you pay attention to who's there, and like that's a way to build relationships. And so for example, Andrew Lewis, I hadn't really had much interaction with him, but Katie Wilson over at the Transit Riders Union had, and we were working on the same the $10 late fee cap, and Katie arranged a meeting and invited me there. So to find out who your council members listen to and develop relationships with them is also a really important organizing tactic. And I mean, we could do a whole nother workshop on like power mapping and influences, and maybe we probably will actually, but that's another way to get an in is to make allies who you know have friends at City Hall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would love to expand upon that too, Kate, because that's very important.
Yeah.
Um,
Now,
it-
as you do that, Devin, I
Mhm.
do want to say that genuine versus transactional, right? This comes along with that, right? And so, because again, I have that same thing. I feel like I'm worried that if I go to people, they're going to be worried that I'm only in it for myself. So, do you feel that there is a challenge with coming across as genuine versus transactional in some of these interactions when you're trying to make these connections?
From community coming to the city, I don't think so. But I know that I talk to community, and I think that they worry now that I work within the halls of government, that I'm coming to them in a transactional nature. And some offices are like that. A lot of politics is transactional. For us, we're always going to come to you and provide you what we believe is the best advice and help you get the thing that you need, right? So I don't worry about that. I think in spaces where you're trying to build that coalition, I think showing up and participating and listening and continuing to show up and participate and listen, that shows people that you're genuine. And I think that goes with organizing your building, going and talking to your neighbors, figuring out how you can set up a way to meet with one another, beyond the organizing part. Get to know your neighbors, be friends with them. That makes it more genuine. And I think that shows people it's not just about me, it's about us, right? The us's of the world. And so I think that's really important. And I would love to really just, again, like what Kate said, getting in the room with those people is so helpful, because we can't, organizing is not, is not a solo sport, right? It is absolutely a team sport.
Marathon. It's not a sprint.
And a marathon. It is like, and anybody who tells you
it's not just a marathon, it's a relay race.
Exactly. And anybody who tells you that they have the answer, that they are the person, is just leading you on, right? That they can do it alone, they're leading you on. You have to be able to do it with your community and growing your community. Like that example with Katie and Councilmember Lewis is a really great example. And I'll even say, when I was in Seattle, Real Change, Tiffany McCoy, Real Change, I think was very helpful for me. A former tenants union organizer, Hannah Alichich, was a huge help for me. Violet Lavatai at the tenants union, really a massive help for me. And through those folks, I was able to form a relationship with Councilmember Sawant's office. And that is really how Seattle was able to get, be one of those people, one of those organizations that now can do that for other folks. And so it is very important that you do show up and that you do, reach out. I remember reaching out to Tiffany at Real Change back in 2016 and pitching this idea. And we found a time to meet, and now our kids play together, right? So again, it's beyond you help us get a thing passed, or I help you get a thing passed. We're friends. Mm-hmm. I'm friends with Kate, I'm friends with Dee. Yeah. So it's that's also something that's important too, because once you make those relationships, it's harder. I am very accountable, but I will say it's harder. It is harder to say no to your friends, right? It is harder to say no to people that you trust. And as an organizer, you should lean on those relationships. And so that's why it's also important to get people that who are already on the inside, but look forward to also getting people who you trust on the inside too. That's how community gets stronger as well.
I'm just going to, emphasize a lot of what they just said, because Devin and Kate are right. My journey in advocacy has been about making relationships with people who have similar passions as mine. And one of the best ways that I've been able to do that is through active listening and empathy. So this was one of the sections about how to craft effective communication. And I think that's one of the aspects of our work as advocates, is that we often feel like we have to be loud, we have to be the voice, instead of listening and seeing how my passions are tied with somebody else's. And the more that I see connections between what I'm passionate about and what somebody else is passionate about, I can speak to those connections. So they feel more connected to my issues, because they can then see how all of the pieces are put together. And so when we practice empathy with, and we practice empathy and try to understand the challenges that are faced by different stakeholders, different advocates, different people in the system, it becomes easier to sort of get your way, to put it that way. So I'll just explain a little bit. One of the projects I'm working on right now is bringing a community, renter council to the community roots housing system. So basically a equivalent board of the board of directors. So the board of renters, board of tenants, the resident council will be advising the board of directors about how best to manage the system. And the board of directors have the legal and fiduciary responsibility to make sure that the staff are doing the job. So I'm working with my community roots housing. I live in community roots housing, and I'm working with management. I'm on the board. I am the enemy, right? In a lot of circles, I am management. And I hear that. I understand. I don't deny that I am on the inside and I am suspect. So I need to respect that. At the same time, I need to make sure that I'm listening to the people that I'm working with on the board. And I hear that their daily frustrations, right? They have a life experience, a perspective around their just day-to-day life. And they often don't think about these larger worldwide implications of just doing their job. And I come in and I say, hey, did you realize that you doing your job has a big impact on me? And I know you want to make this a good place for the tenants to live. So as a tenant, don't you want to work with me? And all of a sudden, I'm not the enemy anymore. I'm somebody that they are saying, oh, yeah, I do want that. You and I both want that same thing. Oh, I should listen to you. So being able to really empathize and understand somebody else's perspective, even if you don't agree with it, is a very important thing in communication. And Kate, I will get to that question in just a second. I wanted to ask the group a little bit about the active listening and ask if there's any responding to criticism, feedback kind of issues that you are dealing with and you would like to chat about. So that is a question I have for the group. Feel free to take some time. So do you have any questions or challenges in your advocacy or life that you're dealing with around responding thoughtfully to criticism and feedback, or practicing empathy and understanding other people's points of view that you'd like some feedback and help on? Go ahead and put it in the chat or raise your hand. Jazz, feel free, come on.
Hey y'all, yeah, excellent question. I don't struggle so much with like listening to other people's perspective. I feel like I've worked on that especially much throughout my life. But what I'm trying to integrate in that process is like being able to stand up for myself in that process. Like, okay, person who disagrees with me, I hear you. Here's how I can show you that that you've been heard, and you're still wrong for these reasons. Or I feel like I haven't been heard in this aspect, right? And I don't know, it's just happening in some personal relationships, but it relates in a, it feels kind of parallel somehow to
Yeah.
more more specific like tenant advocacy situations where like one of my friends is struggling with like bug issues, and the person who was supposed to fix those bug issues is having like just one of those situations where they kind of grind on each other, and so they didn't get the bug service that they needed. And I'm like, do I go like call them up, or like do a Seattle Solidarity style like round robin, like a whole bunch of people calling them and complaining, or can I talk to them and be like, look, I get that y'all had a rough interaction, and then I don't really know what else to say to try to like peacefully or like non-confrontationally and hopefully maybe even more effectively get the service that we need. And it kind of it's just to wrap this all up, it's the person offering the bug service to get rid of pests is one thing, but like when it's the landlord who doesn't really care whether this person gets homeless or not, it's much more difficult for me to see a empathetic path forward, because I know they are not going to listen to me. Their whole job description requires them not to listen to me. What do?
Absolutely. And that is that all of these strategies are going to be dependent on the person you're speaking to. And that is a huge part of this problem, right? Is that a lot of people will actively avoid finding common ground because they know they don't want to. And I would have to say the best way to deal with that is to recognize it and figure out how to go around them, right? So that's kind of what I've done with my system, or in terms of my housing situation. So I spent a lot of time advocating to my manager, going to resident services, going to the different channels. And the opportunity came up that I was, my neighbors actually helped me write the letter to get me on the board. And that was
sorry, board of what?
Board of directors for my housing situation, right? So
nice.
That's not possible for everybody.
Right.
Landlord response to power, Shannon just put in there, and the other Shannon put in the chat, responding to landlord evading tenant requests to fix something or lack of responsiveness. Yeah, I think Chaz was saying that. So the empathizing and understanding is a useful strategy when you know they're kind of already on your side, and then they want to work with you. They just have this sense that you're the enemy already. And so let's see. Well, I'm just going to read this from Carrie, because I said, maybe if the person saw the pests at their own home or office, Mamoma says about most issues, your landlord would never live with that. And that's true. So the legal aspect of pest control is, to me, these kinds of situations where if somebody's not going to be understanding with you, if you're attempting to be empathetic and be a good communicator and they are refusing, call in a lawyer. You don't actually have to have a lawyer. You can find laws and write up something and say, I'm pursuing action. If you use language, so this is the note about power. Landlords respond to power. And the law in this culture is power to a lot of people. And they know they're probably doing something illegal. If they know you know exactly what they're doing that's illegal, and you can tell them, and they are less likely to evade it, then you get into retaliation. And that's, again, none of these things. If you're coming into a hostile living situation, if you're going to be in this fight with management like this, that's when you need good advocates. So all of the stuff about understanding and empathizing, that's how you get your neighbors involved, because your neighbors are going to be on your same side as you. And they're probably going to be having these same issues as you. So you use the understanding, empathy with them and use lawyers with the people who are going to be spinning you around. Devin, did you want to respond to it?
Yeah, I definitely wanted to add to what you're talking about here, Chaz, because there's degrees of organizing, right? And I think that that's a really important thing to remember. And there's degrees of response. And I think, Sanatina really laid that out well, with, the journey of like becoming a board member and things like that, and really having to work up the chain of command, so to speak, at Community Roots. But, I have 3 examples that I think really illustrate what I mean by degrees of organizing. So, the first example I can think of is a building that I worked with in 2018, 2019, a Seattle Housing Authority building on Capitol Hill. And they were not getting the repairs done that they needed. They had openly hostile management in their building. And were very retaliatory when they would ask for very simple things that the landlord was supposed to be giving them. We organized and went to the SHA board and gave public comment at one meeting. And from that one meeting, we got the director of their housing for like that area of SHA to come down and meet with the tenants. That manager got fired and those repairs were made. That's one level, right? Like that is going to like the kind of traditional, I would say traditional route, right? The second example, it's a personal one for me. Around the same time, I was living on a building, actually just a couple blocks away from there. And we had been having boiler issues. It was an old building, old boiler, and we'd have been having boiler issues for months. And, where we would just have cold water randomly and sometimes for days. And the landlord was saying, well, we got, it's going to take time, we got to fix it. But because I knew my rights as a tenant, I knew that they had to do it within a certain amount of time. And, so the first time, I was kind of cool with it because they got things done eventually, blah, blah, blah. But I remember Christmas Day, inviting my parents over to stay, and we didn't have hot water. We were all taking cold showers. Everyone in the building, we didn't have hot water. And the landlord was like, we'll take care of it after the new year. So I was like, okay, well, December 26th, I'm calling SDCI, the Seattle Department of Construction Inspection, and saying, they are violating habitability laws. And so SDCI actually acted very quickly. They called the landlord and they said, this is a very basic thing that you have to do. And if you, and it is violating habitability, like that is very basic. That is a basic human need. And it's a basic law. If you do not fix this, we will condemn your building, which they knew they weren't going to have to do. But the threat of condemning the building was, well, you're out rent for 36 units, right? And so that's another degree. And then I would say even further, kind of the largest degree of organizing, think about Carl Hageland, who was just a vicious and still continues to be a vicious landlord, especially to Black and brown tenants and immigrant tenants. And he pushed as much as he could for a very long time, letting people feel like that they had no power and no voice, even when they were living with cockroaches and rats and moles and not getting repairs and having countless violations. And so those folks organized with Councilmember Sawant's office and got the Carl Hageland law passed. So the guy got a law named after him because he was such a bad landlord.
Out the slumlord law.
Yeah. And so basically what that says is you cannot raise rent on tenants until they live until their building and their unit is habitable and all issues are fixed. And that's a huge incentive because we know that landlords, especially without rent control, want to get as much money as they possibly can. And so they will fix the thing faster. And so I think that there are ways for us to advocate, and you can have that person-to-person advocacy as well, without having to go to the Carl Hageland law route. And I think that, especially in Seattle over the past couple of years, we have had this, we have learned to organize.
Tiffany asked, you could repeat what you just said, Devin?
Yeah,
part?
sorry, I missed the part about the terrible landlord who had a law named after them. I just wanted to write it down so I could look up the law. And
Yeah, the
Carl
Carl Hagelin.
Hagelin. Yeah, I'll put in the chat.
thank you.
Yeah, and look,
Carl
that's what you
something.
get. You know you're doing a bad job when you have a law named after you usually, right? So, but yeah, you know, I think that is important to note, that you can start small and grow bigger. And we have, you are entitled to assert your rights. As a tenant, you have the right to organize. You have the right to live in a place that works. You have a right to have repairs made on time. You know, you have a right to live in a safe place. And so, like, understanding your rights, and thank goodness there are folks, you know, like Seattle to teach you your rights. That is your power. That is your superpower as well. Because like Valentina said, then you can send an email and say, well, revised code of Washington, blah, 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 or Seattle municipal code, blah, 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 says that you have to do this. And then they're like, ah, shit, they know. And if they know their rights, they probably know how to get people to pester me about it too. So even that, even just saying, and some landlords will see that as hostile. I'll tell you, I've had landlords tell me that they think that's hostile, but just being like, hey, look, I know my rights, you have to do this, is a fine starting point, and moving up from there. We don't have to go nuclear right away. And that is, I think, something that we need to unlearn, you know, from the past, I would say 10 years or so of organizing in Seattle, that we can gradually move our way up. And in there too is organizing with your neighbors. Like, I found out that my neighbors didn't have hot water either. And then I was like, well, fuck it, man. I know who to contact. I'm going to do it. So there you go.
Yeah. And that overcoming challenges of communication, you know, was one of the bullet points. And I'll get this. My PowerPoint's not working right now. It crashed on me right before and I couldn't deal with it. But like, I will email it all to you. So it'll be in the, you know, afterwards. So you'll get all the pretty pictures and the bullet points. But yeah, communication challenges are going to happen. And I really do appreciate, Chaz, your notes on strategy in the thing, because yeah, finding pressure points is the best, I think, succinct thing to put in that. How do you advocate is find where the weak spot is in the system around your particular issue. And every single issue is going to have a little different of a weak spot, especially because, like, you know, yeah, some people, landlords, are going to be empathetic and understanding. I'm lucky. I did choose this particular building and system because I know that I have a more responsive audience in the management for this particular system. But it also means that I've also spent a lot of time making sure that they're aware that they have an active tenant rights group in their system. So they better not mess with us. Other people don't have that option. And so they have to get aggressive quicker. But yeah, Devin is right. There's a lot of unlearning to do sometimes around what is the best strategy. And as I said earlier, I can be seen as the enemy in a lot of this work because I am representing the landlords in being on the board of directors. I am very honest with my community in the different aspects I know I'm suspect in, and I don't deny it. And so that's one of the other things about building trust in relationship building is when you try and deny, you know, your conflicts of interests, or if you try and hide things because you think, you know, people won't understand, that's going to cause more trouble down the line than if you just talk to people about you fully and just say like, yeah, hey, this is me, I believe in this, and I'm not going to, like, you know, we're not going to fight about it, but we can have lots of discussions. And that's the point of this, is we chat and we figure out better ways to communicate. That's the essence of all of this. If you want to take one thing from this workshop tonight, it is communication is always changing. We're never not learning. I, as a professional communicator, am still messing up every day in my personal and professional life around talking and writing letters. I just admitted earlier, I am terrified of reaching out to people. I avoid emails. Ask Tanya. I'm sorry, Tanya, but like I try. And like that's one of my weaknesses, right? Other people would melt if they did this, right? To talk in front of you all and have, you know, things to say for an hour. Oh my goodness, not possible. I thrive. And so that's one of the things about communication as well. It's finding what your strengths are. Are you somebody who writes really, really well? You like doing research and you can, you know, pound out a letter with lots of details and hand it off to somebody who will go and give a speech, because you can't do that, right? So a lot of the things about community building and communication is we help each other and we share what we can do and what we can't do. I see you nod your head a lot, Devin.
Yeah, I just have to say, like, you're describing just my ideal form of organizing, honestly. You know, I used to tell tenants when I would organize that organizing is just talking to people. And it's just sharing, you know, how you like sharing your experience and hearing theirs. And then finding out what your strengths and weaknesses are. And you know, that's why it's important to work in coalition with other people, because exactly. I can fake being a confident guy when I'm at work, but man, you know, I am a homebody introvert in real life, right? And you know, like that is my strength. But you know, I have a lot of things that I'm not very good at, and that's why I rely on other people. You know, our office, for example, I always tell people that a legislative office is an idea factory. I'm not a fucking community planner, you know, I'm not an architect, though I dropped out of architecture school. You know, I'm not a lot of things, but you know, I listen to community and I listen to people who are those things, right? And we have our central staff who helps us take our ideas and put them into actual like written code. And we couldn't do that work alone, right? Like it all takes using the expertise of people working together. And even though I'm not a community planner, we're going to pass some pretty revolutionary land use policy in the next couple of months to make it kind of a crazy socialist hellhole here in Seattle, quote unquote, which I'm excited about.
I love my socialist hellhole. I'm just going to say,
too.
I think it's a great hellhole.
Yeah, and it's going to get hellholier because we're gonna make it easier for people to be able to buy homes and things.
A
like
hell mount. Let's just,
you know?
Seattle is the hell mount. Yes, no?
Right. So, you know, so
yeah.
I just want to make sure that folks understand that like, you have to rely on other people. And like I said, if there is one person telling you that they are the person leading you, it can't be that. It has to be hierarchical. It can't be hierarchical. It has to be, you know, linear or whatever. You know, you have to build on the same level. Horizontal. Thank you. Because they're just selling you snake oil if they're telling you that that look to them, they're the great person, because nobody can do it alone.
Yep. And I did want to update people in the chat, or, you know, people who can't always read the chat. I want to update you. So we got some questions about, Tiffany asked what the best summary of resources to learn and about tenant rights in Seattle. And Dee posted the seattle.gov/renting in Seattle website. We're good at Seattle. We advocate and we get it. Chaz responded as well. There's lots of resources. DSA Housing Justice Work Group is working on a unification networking strategy to combine and amplify the power of various resources. And Dee says we're sending out a resource guide. So after the meeting, yeah, we'll send a follow-up. Shannon had a few questions, and I do want, yeah, this is one of those things of like, the frustrations that come with communicating to power, what is currently in power nowadays, it can be incredibly frustrating. And so Shannon's asking, what do you do to build power respect when you don't have access to an attorney? And when the line of command exempts them from accountability, right? So these are all great questions. I don't think that they're necessarily appropriate for this particular workshop, but I do think that a future one talking about how legal issues and relate to how we can get deeper into legal issues is a big one. But yeah, because unfortunately, as we were just saying earlier, some people aren't going to respect you. And so you have to find allies to pressure them in order to get attention. And it's never going to be perfect. Sorry, there's always going to be exceptions to all of these situations. And that's what I try to encourage people when you're getting into advocacy and you're thinking about this in terms of like, well, how do I communicate? How do I effectively persuade people of my position and get what I need? It's about talking to people at your level first, talking to your neighbors, and this group, right? We are working together in the Seattle Renter Organizing Council. At the beginning of the meeting, Kate listed a whole lot of opportunities to organize with things like RAP and so the DSA, Seattle Democratic Socialists of America. Is that a different one? But Housing Justice Working Group, there's going to be, all of these different groups exist largely because we all have different strategies of communicating. And there's often a lot of frustration, especially on the left, that there's all these splinter groups and you think, why can't you just be one group? And the truth is, each group acts a little bit differently, speaks a little bit differently, communicates a little bit differently, and has an impact on the whole system. I'll give a quick example from the transit advocacy world, which is also something I'm active in. So there's a few different transit advocacies organizations in this area. Three of the big ones I'm just going to name, Transportation Choice Coalition, Cascade, and Transit Raiders Union. So of these three, there's a varying level of radicalness. And part of the way that these three groups work the system is Transit Raiders Union is the most radical. And so if we are part of a coalition with Transportation Choices Coalition, who's the most moderate, more, going in the political in the halls of power, if they know, if the people in the industry see that we're supporting transit or Transportation Choices Coalition, it's going to be my train of thought just passed by. Coalition. Devin, you're nodding your head. Are you getting what I'm saying?
I get you.
If your advocacy is more radical than the group that you're currently advocating with, find a group that's more radical. If you think the group you're currently organizing with is too radical, you can find a more moderate group. It doesn't mean that we're not working together. It means that we are all working in our lanes, working in our best environments so that we can impact the whole system. So in the tenant rights world, right, Seattle might be considered one of the more radical groups in terms of renter rights and all that. And, Solid Ground would be considered maybe one of the more moderate of the ones. That's just out of I'm not sure, but yeah, see there. So solid ground is very important to this work. Without solid ground, Seattle might not exist because Solid Ground made a place for an organization for like B Seattle to be able to come up. So if you think that just because something is more moderate or, you know, not as radical as you want it to be, doesn't mean it's not effective. It just means it's in a different lane. And so that's a big part of sorry, Kate put a comment in it. Solid Ground's pretty progressive. She says B Seattle would be compared to Low Income Housing Alliance. They're not nearly as radical, but they're effective. And Carrie asks, is there a user's guide anywhere? Can you expand a little bit about that, Carrie? Or do you want to come off mute? If you don't want to come off mute, say.
I'm thinking about, like, since it's almost back to school time, I'm thinking about when you walk in and there's like all the different clubs have their little table and people to talk to. Is there anything like that? Like, it can be written form. It would be cool to have like a big room where you could just go around and talk to people and find your home. Maybe we get more people involved. I don't know. But
Like
I'm liking the radical sounding thing, but I just, you know, I'm been doing this for a while, but not long enough to know the different nuances of the different groups. And I know that like some are local, some are statewide, but I want to get like a better idea of how to get plugged in a way that all feel comfortable and be able to be more effective too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Could I respond to Carrie on that one?
Please.
So I would say, you know, the folks out here probably know of like Slack and Discord and things like that they're working on. But I will note that, you know, I had mentioned earlier that I came up learning organizing in San Francisco, and I was a tenant organizer in San Francisco as well. And I think about a housing justice conference that we organized several organizations, and again across that spectrum of radicalness, you know, coming together and hosting exactly what you're talking about. And we did a weekend where we did workshops and roundtables and things like that, and ended up coming up with the idea for a law that then the next year the San Francisco chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America ran as a ballot initiative and won, you know, to protect, I think it was just to give a shit ton of money for affordable housing and protect renters. And that came from that meeting, right? And so, like, you know, if that room doesn't exist yet, it can. And it's really valuable. Again, I want to stress that you brought up Solid Ground, the relationship between Solid Ground and B Seattle. Absolutely. That is a perfect example, because they did help us start with our first tenant rights workshops. And, you know, I went around trying to find people to work with to do what we called at the time tenant rights boot camp, you know, as a way to teach people how to assert their rights and fight for more. You know, we had more moderate, you know, yeah, I think that they're a pretty, you know, they're a pretty progressive organization. But I think about the Tenant Law Center through Catholic Community Services. We ended up partnering with them a lot. And they, you know, provided an attorney to come and give legal, you know, like pro bono legal advice at our workshops for about a year. And that is what jump-started us. Like, that is really what like kicked that off. And so, you know, again, like, yeah, you don't have to be part of that group or that thing, but there is cross-pollination, you know, like, I've had folks at DSA say to me, well, you know, we're probably a little bit more radical than you. And I'm like, well, you know, I got you the winter eviction ban, but, you know, I understand that you feel that way because I work for a Democrat, right? You know, and I'm not even a member of DSA anymore, but I was for 7 years. Now a member of the Working Families Party, but I'll still, you know, I will still work with the, you know, Democrats in City Council. I will work with Councilmember Sawant. I will work with DSA, and, you know, an organization like Lehigh or something else as well, something that's more established, because again, using those individual strengths is very powerful. And so again, if the roundtable doesn't exist yet, that's the beauty of organizing. You can make it happen.
Yep. And I would actually love to be a part of that, because, and I think a lot of different organizations would love to be a part of that. So I believe that that is a great place to kind of come to a conclusion. Though, before we do, Kate, you have your hand up.
Yeah, the tenants union is actually doing a tenant power assembly over the course of a couple days in Olympia. I just dropped a link to register. It's coming up in September. I will be there. I think it would be a great place to kind of network and find out what others are doing around the state and locally. Seattle is really hyper local. We really just focus on Seattle specific issues and then take a very like hands-off role in statewide issues. We kind of just signal boost the Housing Alliance, but you know, the tenants union is statewide. Like there's a lot of this may already be happening. I don't want to 100% endorse it because I don't know the details of it. I just know that Violet Lavatai with the tenants union reached out to me and asked me to make sure my calendar was clear so I could be there.
Nice. Yeah, and that is a thing. I think, I don't know about other regions in the country, but I feel like in the Northwest here, most of the organizations that are working on an issue that are sympathetic, we're on the same, you know, we're on the same trajectory of what we want. We like working with each other. You know, we might argue about details and all that, but at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure, you know, Lehigh and Compass and DSC are going to come on board when it means the renters are going to be better protected. Some people might not have that opinion, and that's good because we need people who are more skeptical than me. I like my position in this world. I have chosen to be sort of a mediate between the radical and the more establishment, because I like to do that mediation role. It's not a comfortable position. And so if you're thinking about getting into some of this kind of stuff, think hard about it. Do you like being the judge amongst your friends, right? It is a lot of times you're trying to decide amongst things you like. You like people, you like both of these issues, you like both of the sides, kind of. Which one do you advocate for, and why? Why are you advocating it? Because of your opinion, or is it what the community is asking for? So that around communication strategy, that's one of the things that we need to look at is around the levels of communication. And we didn't get to nearly as much as I was hoping. But yeah. Oh, that's a good idea, Carrie. Maybe a full page stranger ad that says, "Hey tenants" at the top with a group info of all the various groups in the region. Yeah, maybe they'd give us a discount on an ad space. Yeah. So these are the kinds of ideas that come out of this kind of thing, right? We just had a great hour-and-a-half conversation about how to communicate in this work. And from it, I learned new strategies and I presented it. So thank you for joining me. Like I said, we'll send out the PowerPoint with all of the information, a lot more organized and digestible. And I encourage you to reach out to me, and I will, I appreciate, thank you, B Seattle, for presenting this. Yes, the conclusion. Sorry, I was like, I had a conclusion, and then Kate talked, and then so I was like, when we are working on communication, we are working on talking to one person. That's what I started this presentation with, the workshop with, because I wanted to make sure that you think about the person that is really what you're focused on, the goal you're going for. And how do they communicate? Think about their communication style. When you think about them, it becomes easier to craft a message for them to hear. And thank you once again, Kate. I think it's time to turn it back over to you.
So there was a question in the chat, real quick. Tiffany was asking if Devin or anyone else has any advice for fighting billionaire university landlords displacing 100 families and what rights they have as tenants.
Yeah, and also I'll say, I did put in the chat in response to that. I think it's worth actually talking to folks who are part of the unions at the university to get on your side there. Kate had mentioned alumni as well. I just think about the University of California, specifically UC Berkeley, and their student housing situation. And they just had a very successful campaign, I believe, organizing alongside the faculty union there, specifically about student housing. And honestly, university landlords are some of the worst ever, anywhere. I participated in organizing in a building in the U District probably 6 years ago now. And so it's not new, unfortunately, and it's very hard. I will not lie, it's very hard. But if you do work with other folks who are part of the university system, who also have that organizing power, again, that does make it a little bit helpful. We were able to help folks stay in their homes and get relocated even through the help of that union and through organizing power. And so it's possible. It's a big fight, but definitely look for some friends in those places.
And then I had a couple of very quick questions for you, Devin, that I asked them in the chat, but we were moving fast. Number one, how much did your landlord pay in fines for not having hot water on Christmas?
Unfortunately, they paid $0 in fines.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then my second question, and I know every council office is different, but it's been a while since I asked this, and the last time it was to Council President Gonzalez, who said she likes form emails that come in mass because it lets her know what's important to large groups of people. I'm wondering how those in general are perceived at City Hall as an organizing tactic.
Mm-hmm. I would say, some offices use it as a way, exactly like former Council President Gonzalez used that. That's how we use it. That's how Shama's office, Councilmember Samont's office uses it. The current council president does not like form emails. But a way that I used to help write form emails is kind of a choose your own adventure. And I think if you can make it look like, give people a space to talk a little bit more, make it look less formy and more normie, that's a way I think of helping get around that. But I would say, like, the further to the right on the spectrum that council members are, the less likely they are to respond to that. So like the more moderate conservatives on the council, they're going to want something more tailored to them. Whereas the more lefty folks in the council understand, like, you got a life, So yeah, so I would say the easiest middle ground for that, Kate, is to figure out a way to do those kind of more normie looking form emails to make it look like, don't use the name of an organization, don't have it say like Action Network or whatever, and have it just look like a normal email. I think that is the easiest way to make that to hit that middle ground.
Interesting. We just for disclosure, we got kind of opposite information from former council president. She told us that she basically said, like, we appreciate it if you take the time to personalize them, but when we're getting hundreds and hundreds of emails on the same subject. Like they aren't being necessarily read super closely, and it's often more of a tally.
That's true. That's true. But I would also say there are folks that look at it in offices that look at that, and it will tally by looking at like, vote yes on this, vote no on this, right? We'll see in the subject line the tally, but having that little bit of variation for those offices, that are using that as an excuse, I would say, to not support that, to not see that as a valid form of communication. That's just a tactic that I've used in the past. Just my personal preference, but I've never also been the council president, so.
Well,
I would like to say, in terms of that, oh, Chaz, in just a second, the form letter, as Devin was saying, the subject line is often what they use to determine if it's, how they do the tally. So you can personalize that as well, right? Form letters can often be personalized. So if that is different, if you just change the subject and, still it's clearly, you're saying yes or no on a thing, that might help with the council members that don't appreciate form letters when it doesn't take as much of your time. That's what I like to do, is change the subject line and maybe one or two things at the very top of the letter, and then the rest of it's form. Chaz?
Sorry, unmuting myself and finishing my question in the chat. It feels a little bit like a divergent, I apologize, but I'm curious to know, how do you reduce or remove the need for a professional lawyer? Like, I've heard of tenants, advocacy groups kind of upskilling themselves and learning about relevant laws. I guess I'm surprised that there's not more like general knowledge and experience among the sort of activist groups that I've been in so far. Like to really hone the question in, how important is the lawyer's like degree and experience? How far can you get without that if you have enough free time to learn and are, sharp-witted?
So as an organizer who is not a lawyer, you can learn a lot. In our resource guide, there's a link to the Washington State landlord tenant laws that they're all public. They're pretty easy to search. You can look them up and then you can cite them. I like to cite them with a link to the law so they know that I know what I'm talking about. But it's also good to just develop a relationship with any lawyers, especially ones who have like law in their email address, because that's intimidating to people. So that's just part of the reason that lawyers sometimes get involved, is just as another tactic to say, like, you have an expert with eyes on this who is not afraid to take this to court or whatever it is. And often it's not that. In fact, I have started asking lawyers, like, do you mind if I just CC you on this email to this landlord that this is not your case, you're not involved, I just want your name on there. And they're surprisingly pretty cool about it. I try to not overuse that tool, but that's like part of the reason that lawyers get involved. But certainly linking to the law gives you a lot of credibility and power.
Mm-hmm.
And WashingtonLawHelp.org is a great resource to be able to point you in the right direction there. The Tenants Union has a great resource guide, like an interactive guide on their website as well. You also have Seattle, that can help teach you your rights. And then I'll also note, and I'm not sure because again, I haven't been in this world in 4 years, but I would assume it's still going. The King County Bar Association's pro bono services, their neighborhood legal clinics. Kate could probably tell you if they're still going on, but when I was around, they were there, free legal clinics where you can go and talk to a lawyer for 30 minutes for free. They can help you draft responses to your landlords, and even sometimes get it on their letterhead. And so that's a really great resource. absolutely free.
The library is a really great resource for legal help. Librarians will help you write a letter and cite law. Like that's part of, they do research. That if you ask a librarian to say, hey, I'm writing a letter and I need to cite this stuff, ask them and they will help you with all the research you need. Fabian, you had a question? Oh, and I apologize. I thought that we were done at 7:30. I had it in my brain and now it's 8. We have like 10 more minutes. 15 minutes.
We haven't
Go ahead,
actually.
Fabian.
Go ahead, Fabian.
Hi. My question is a little like large scale, I guess, but how can you work on policy through tenant organizing as opposed
Yes.
to doing it on a case-by-case basis? Like, how do you involve them in a campaign?
Involve who in a campaign?
Tenants.
Ah, yes. So we didn't really discuss a lot as much about reaching out to your neighbors. And wow, I said that and my brain disappeared. Getting tenants involved in legislation. That is a long-term challenge for many issues, not just renters' rights. And so in terms of communication, let's talk about talking with your neighbors. So I did a workshop a few months ago, I think, called newsletters, the power of newsletters. And I gave that workshop with using the example of how I kind of organized my building during the pandemic by posting a one-page newsletter once a month on everybody's door. That's it. I had fun news ID items around what's happened in the neighborhood, information about the COVID, you know. Basically, I became the manager, as it were. Like I was a source of information to the tenants that what they weren't getting from a lot of people, because, you know, back in the 2020 days, it's a lot of chaos. And so I became a trusted source. And then from that, so they boosted me up to the board level where I am advocating, I'm changing policy in a system, in this particular system, but it's the same strategy to do it in a government system in the city, right? So in my case, I am going to start advocating to my neighbors about the Office of Renter Rights Standard that the Seattle Renter Organizing Council is starting to spearhead. And that's a major piece of legislation that is going to start, you know, we're going to start working on. And having that connection, just, you know, a personal connection with my neighbors around a newsletter. I introduced everybody to my cat. You know, I asked for other neighbors' animal stories, you know, like, who's your pets and all that stuff. And it was incredibly effective at having, at being able to talk to people about deeper issues and get them on board. So, Devin, any thoughts on your
Yeah, I would say, you know, and that's Sonatina doing a really good job, giving a very good example of how she asserted her rights as a tenant, right? That, you know, that tenants are allowed to organize, like that is a right that you have enshrined in Washington state law. And part of that is you can post flyers in common areas and on doors. So, you know, if it's hard to talk to your neighbors, that's an easy way to kind of get the conversation going. A lot of the tenants that I've worked with in the past, that's how they started working together, is they would slip a note under the door and be like, hey, do you have mold issues? I have mold issues. If so, here's my email. And that's a good place to start. I'll also note that not one piece of tenant legislation in the history of the city of Seattle, not one tenant protection was ever passed without tenant organizing, ever. You know, it wasn't out of the goodness of the hearts of the council members, and even the ones that know. I mean, we have a council member on council who used to work at the tenants union. You know, I used to work at the tenants union. You know, still, it is important to have tenants engaged. And so I think that's why it is great to have an organization like Be Seattle, but also, you know, the Housing Justice Work Group through Seattle VSA, the Puget Sound Tenants Union, all of these groups that are there to build collective tenant power. Because, you know, when there is an issue, that means that you can, again, come as a coalition and talk together. And tenants always win when they work together. So I think that is a very, very important thing to hammer home. And then look at the most recent example I can say is look at social housing. You know, I'll tell you, man, we tried for 2 years to get that through council. You know, to get money for social housing, to set up an office for social housing. And we met roadblock after roadblock from, you know, from the executive and from other council offices. And community members came in, tenants, shit ton of tenants came in and said, fine, man, we'll run an initiative. And really, I think, set the game plan for how tenants can affect policy in the city. You know, we're now the first city in the United States to have a social housing developer. And since that's happened, you know, I talk to folks all the time. I talk to folks in Atlanta and in New York and Chicago and San Francisco all the time. How do we get social housing like Seattle? And it is through tenant power that we got that. And now, luckily, we get to, in the council side, be like, yay, we get to do the work now. And we couldn't do that work without the tenants already doing that.
There's a saying that I'm not particularly a fan of, but it is true in a lot of ways these days. What is it? I think it was LBJ, the president, Johnson, who said, like, I agree with you, now make me do it, right? It's a longer quote, right? But that's a lot of times of what we're dealing with in the system is, I agree with you, but like, I don't have to, so why should I? And so part of this collective building is just for a few weeks, months, maybe sometimes, and it can take a long time, but like the more people that are yelling about an issue, the more it's going to be paid attention to. And so if we get, you know, a whole lot of buildings saying we want this, it's going to have a lot more of an impact than just, you know, a council member saying they support it. So Fabian, I see still your hand up, but I do want to, I'm not sure if you had a follow-up question, but we have somebody on the phone. I wanted to see, you have a question or comment?
Yeah.
Hi, what's your name?
Judith, and I'm from the phone. I'm currently researching an issue, and two things I ran into. One is I ran into the word tenant versus the word renter. So I looked it up in the dictionary, and tenant means you're renting. The reason I ask that is sometimes there's a difference between a resident and a tenant. Specifically, the topic that I am researching right now has to do with the rights of residents in homeless shelters.
Mm-hmm.
And I found a policy from Seattle's Tiny Villages, whatever thing, that presence of bed bugs must be promptly reported. And the reason that I ask that is just yesterday it came to my attention that the building that sadly I am residing in right now has had a known bed bug issue for quite some time. And I just learned about it by accident. And it's not on the floor that I'm on, but I made a point of bringing it to the attention of my case manager in writing, just by saying, I happen to overhear the following, and if it's not on your agenda for a staff meeting, please get it on the agenda, and I think something needs to be done about this. And I just relayed information about the person who was discussing this clearly had no awareness of the fundamentals of what does and does not influence the behavior of bedbugs. And I don't know how you can organize around anything if you're in a homeless shelter. So that's where I'm coming from, because residents and tenants are not the same thing.
Yeah, and I do want to make that a point. So I heard you mention the dictionary, and there is this thing with legislation and definitions. Definitions are very important to legislation, and Devin, I know you're going to talk about this in a second. I want you to, because you're more a part of this, but like a definition in a dictionary does not matter. Like, I want to make that clear, because we need to make sure that the language of the law that we are looking at is addressed, not a common usage that we might use for words. So yeah, in a lot of circumstances, the word tenant and the word resident can have very different meanings. They may also mean the same thing. In the HUD guidelines, tenant and resident are the same thing, but in city legislation that might be different. So Devin, did you want to talk to this real quick? And
Sure.
I'm getting a note we need to wrap up soon, so yeah.
You absolutely nailed it. I mean, so the definition that any given law is going to follow is the definition that's written into that law. So you know, I think about, I talk a lot about definitions right now through my work, because we're going through all the city code and figuring out how to define social housing, you know, and definitively define it based upon what was passed via I-135. Because I'll tell you that even within the city, there's a lot of people who don't know what social housing is. So we have to find that definition. But you know, because of that, you know, because we really do have to put it down in all of our code in all of these different places, that in one part, you know, in the housing code, a definition might be one thing, but in the tenant rights code or in the land use code, it might be different, right? And I will say this is a whole, you know, I believe this is a hole in what we have right now in Seattle that I think will take a lot of discussion and a lot of work with people who are affected by it. But shelters don't fall underneath the tenant rights that are afforded to people who are in apartments or houses, unfortunately. You know, they are not qualified, you know, under city law as anywhere that I know of, at least, as like a residence, you know, because the nature of shelter, and I think this has to go to like the federal funding, is like the nature of shelter through the city and through the county, through the state, is that it's transitional. You know, it's supposed to be there to help you get into a long-term home.
Transient,
but
yeah.
that doesn't mean that you don't deserve those rights, right? And so that is, I think, a perfect example of organizing. And there are unhoused folks that do a lot of really great organizing in the city. You know, Nicholsville, Share and Wheel, Women in Black, like they have been organizing for a very long time. And you know, I just think that is another thing that we need to start looking at for sure.
Yeah.
That is an organizing, that is a hole in the law and an organizing opportunity.
Yeah, and I do, yeah, I appreciate that coming up. And that note about tenant versus resident, it goes back to the subject, right? This workshop is about communication. And what I want you to take from this workshop is that the individual communication you have for your particular topic is going to be extremely nuanced compared to somebody else's. Somebody living in temporary shelter, tent city, or a tiny home, or you know, a homeless shelter, they're going to have different communication challenges than somebody living in, you know, supportive housing, or just low-income housing, or market rate housing. So we need to see the nuances in all of these things. And as you know, we've been saying, treat all people who live in Seattle equally in terms of dignity around habitation. That's our ultimate goal, I feel, is to make sure that if you live in Seattle, you are residing here for a certain amount of time, you are able to have a warm or cool place to lay your head for an evening and be safe and have a place, you know, to keep your personal items. Doesn't seem like a lot. And I think with that, just bare minimum, a lot of the groups that we talk about today can come together, and we do. So yeah, it is actually now time to wrap up. So I really do want to thank you, Devin, so much for the perspective given, and thank you everybody for contributing the questions and comments. And I hope to see you at a future organizing meeting. Kate?
Okay, y'all. We have 3 minutes left, and we still like to wrap up sorry, Judith, we are out of time for tenant questions. So we have an action for everyone. This is a form email. So please, as Devin mentioned, feel free to edit it and change the subject just a little bit. So the Services Not Sweeps Coalition just launched a campaign to demand that Seattle City Council pass legislation to ban encampment removals sweeps during the winter and during extreme weather events. So in 2020, through organizing, especially Devin worked a lot on this, Seattle won the winter eviction ban to protect tenants from being displaced during the 3 coldest months of the year. So this ban would build on our already existing winter eviction ban and expand those protections to folks who are already living outside and just trying to survive through Seattle's cold, wet, and dark winter months. It would also prevent the city from displacing people during the increasingly regular cold snaps, heat waves, and wildfire smoke our region has been experiencing. Encampment sweeps are traumatizing and dangerous for those who experience them, costly for the taxpayers paying for them, and completely ineffective at actually getting people permanent housing. Seattle can't claim to respect and uphold human rights as our core value when continuing to perpetuate these violent acts against our most vulnerable neighbors. We have the opportunity to push for a more compassionate approach to our city's response to homelessness. But we need your help, and we need the help of your neighbors. So please share this around. Take a moment to take action regarding this campaign and send a letter. Like the winter eviction ban, this would ban sweeps from December 1st to March 1st, the time of the year when survival is most challenging for folks outside, and also ban sweeps during extreme weather events. So we'll drop a link to the Action Network email. And then I just wanted to remind folks again, there is going to be a rally at City Hall on August 2nd at noon. When we talk about effective communication and relationship building, that's showing solidarity with causes with similar values. So if this is touching something inside of you or overlapping with your values, this is a great place to go build relationships and build trust with other members in the community. You know, you start to notice who keeps showing up for things, and if you make your presence known and you show up in solidarity for folks. I know Carrie mentioned it feeling a little transactional, and maybe to a certain extent it is, but like that's kind of how you build trust, is just doing things so people know that you're reliable and that you have the same values, and then they'll want to do things for you too. So that's definitely part of it. So please, I know it's the middle of the day, but if you are free, please come down, and we'll have signs and speakers, and it'll be a great time. And it is 8 p.m. So I would like to thank you all for coming, and a special thank you to Sanatina and Devin. You two were wonderful, and everyone have a great night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
the
you.
folks-
Bye. Have a good night.
Before folks leave, I'll just say that we're supportive of the work from that coalition. And I'll join you all on Wednesday. So looking forward
Thank
to
you, Devin.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Thanks, guys.
Oof, okay.
Recording. Can I hit the stop button?